You're listening to Up an Octave, a podcast by Sonivia, the podcasting agency that believes that women and non-binary people deserve to take up space in the podcasting industry because our thoughts, voices, and stories matter. Here you'll learn how to make dope podcasts that inspire, educate, convert, and most importantly, make your voice shine. I'm your host, Rue Spence, and I'm here to take podcasting up an octave. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Up an Octave. Thank you so much for being here today. I just want to start off by saying thank you so much to everyone who listened to last week's episode. It was so fun getting to kind of come back and rejuvenate things a little bit after taking the summer off. So let's dive into today's episode and keep the party going. I am talking about how to adapt your art into the medium of podcasting. So we're going to talk a lot about knowing the rules, breaking them effectively, and really transitioning from your comfort zone to what is tried and true. I was inspired to talk about this after a recent conversation with someone who is in the storytelling space, and they are struggling to get over some of the mental block of this is how this medium is performed that isn't translating 100% into podcasting. And so I'm assuming that there are other people who are also experiencing this and who are maybe having the mental block of not knowing how their work or their art fits in to the world of podcasting. So if that's you, or even if this just sounds interesting to you, grab something cozy to drink and let's rock it out. So when I was having this initial conversation that's kind of serving as the inspiration for this episode, as I mentioned, I was talking with someone who is a live performer, and they're blending storytelling into podcasting. And storytelling live on stage has its own set of rules, has its own set of expectations, in the same way that the art of podcasting also does. And so when I was trying to explain it to them there are different expectations that consumers of podcasts have than the people who are sitting down to see your live show. Something that I brought up that I feel like really just kind of nails what I'm talking about here and helps shift the mindset a little bit is to consider when Disney Plus put Hamilton on, and you could watch it kind of as a movie on Disney Plus, that as someone who has been involved in theater and is a lover of theater, one of my favorite things about going to a live performance is, you get all the quirks and nuance of they did this differently, they forgot the line, whatever that is, but also the fixed perspective. You buy the seat that informs the type of experience you're going to have. If you sit front row, you are going to see the sweat beading off of the actors' faces. You are going to see the wig lines. You are going to see, the microphones tucked into their hairline. You're going to see all of that. And you almost lose the forest through the trees a little bit. Whereas if you're sitting up high, kind of looking down over the stage, that's where you get to really see the choreography, to really see the choices that are made with lighting and set design. So it's a very different experience. And unless you're seeing a show multiple times, that is the experience that you're going to have. Now, when we're watching a movie or a TV show, something that is filmed, we expect multiple camera angles, right? We're expecting a close-up, a wide shot, B-roll, like all of these things that go into how film is shot that is very different from just the fixed perspective that you get sitting in a seat in a live theater. And so what Hamilton did for the Disney Plus, the Pro Shot, was there were several different cameras that sometimes you were really tight in on the actor. Sometimes you were watching the choreography and it moved, and that made it more appealing to people who maybe have never had the ability or interest to go and see a Broadway performance or a live theater performance. That, maybe they've watched a musical film before, like Greatest Showman or, something like that, but that's still cinema. And so to see a musical, to see a theatrical production presented as television almost, meant that the rules had to be kind of circumvented a little bit to appeal to people for whom theater is not native. The same is true on the inverse, where for someone who I have seen Hamilton several times on stage, and I think it can never get old, but seeing it presented that way, being filmed, was such a radically different experience than actually seeing it live. In some ways good, in some ways not my favorite. And that's also something magical to remember as you're looking at translating your own art, is that I would never say to somebody, well, if you saw the Hamilton movie, you're all set. Now, if you say, I saw it, it was all right, then you're probably all set. But if you say, I saw it and now I love it, I would say seeing it live is an incredibly different experience. And in part, we learned, especially during COVID, that a huge part of that is just energy. Sharing that space with other people is so incredible. Same with sporting events. If you're more of a sports person, watching the game at home, you are A, probably more comfortable. B, you are getting commentary from, the commentators. You are able to get the replays, and it's a very different experience. But when you are sitting in the stands, the culminating energy of sharing that with so many people is an entirely different experience altogether. So, just the rules of it are a little bit different. Part of that is culturally what you're expecting. If you go to a sporting event, it's not unheard of to pay $12 for a beer. But if I was hanging out at home and I was like, oh, can I grab a beer out of the fridge? And my friend was like, yeah, give me $12. Like, that's what? Like, you probably spent $12 on the whole 6-pack, right? Like, it's, that's unheard of. And, it goes more than that. I can go to a clean bathroom if I'm watching the game at home, or, there's so many things that just make the experience what the experience is. And so as you look to kind of cross over, you almost need to consider the rules of each medium and find the places where they intersect. Whether you are watching a sporting event live or watching it on TV, the things that are in place are that you want to participate in that. There is something interesting to you about this thing, or you love someone very much who has dragged you along. The same is true for podcasting, whether it's a storytelling medium or something that I love is also seeing like things that feel very physical, like people talking about dance or performance, that it's like, this feels so visually connected that finding ways to make it apply to podcasting means that you have to understand where those intersections lie. The conveying of information is huge. How you are able to verbalize and articulate the points that you're getting across is major for the success of your show. If you are talking about something that is oriented in space, you're telling a story and you're describing a room, are you going to be able to convey that without any visual cues? Are you going to be able to say, the couch was against this wall facing the door, blah, blah, blah? Like, are you going to be able to make that a word picture for people to understand without any visual context? The other thing that was feeling not native to this person was that they said that editing felt like cheating. And I love this comment so much. I strongly disagree with it, but I love it. And it's something that comes up often for people. It's because if you are in a performance background or a live theater background, it does feel like cheating because there are no second chances in theater. There's no second chances in being on stage. What happens is what happens. But that can be a little bit more difficult to listen to in podcasting. The other thing that makes performing so wonderful is often you are in an environment catered to performance. So this is obviously a little bit different if you're doing like a theater in the park or some more guerrilla style theater. But if you are in a venue that is suited for that performance, there's often more soundproofing. There are often techs behind the scenes. You know, if you are performing music, someone is there to hand you a guitar. Someone is there when that guitar has a string break to hand you a different guitar. Whereas with the nature of podcasting being more of a one-person show, there is no one else handing you a guitar. And so when you have these moments of whatever the equivalent of a string breaking is for you, for me, it's helicopters and bugles going off because I live on an army base or my daughter waking up. Actually, right now there's a helicopter outside. These are things that are not particularly listenable in the podcasting format. If I was just having a conversation with you on my couch in real time, it's not as noticeable, but it is distracting in a podcast, or it can be. So the ability to edit those moments out helps to keep the narrative more consistent and helps to make it more engaging to listen to. So whatever your equivalent of that guitar string breaking is, those moments where there would be someone else supporting you, that is where editing comes in. Editing kind of acts like those extra hands on stage to support you. Whatever that feels like for you, that is the gift that editing gives you. And, you know, that's not to say that you can't still do it in one take, that you can't push through, especially if you are in this like narrative and that's something that you are so comfortable with. That's something that is your wheelhouse, that you're like, I feel really good about just doing a one take push through. I love that. That's awesome. But there are still things that we would look to do to make sure that you sound your best. Simply equalizing, setting your luffs, these are all things that I've talked about in the past, are going to make you more consumable. You know, that's the same as in real time. If you were on stage, you have someone in the sound booth who is mixing, who is making sure that your levels are right, that your mic sounds good. These are all things that are happening, but the nature of podcasting makes you fill all of those roles at once. You are the stage manager, the props person, the lighting design, whatever there is that's a moving part. The only difference is that now you are responsible for filling those shoes, where that may not feel like something that even you are necessarily cognizant of happening in a live performance. It is happening. The difference is that you are not responsible for it. So try and shift your perspective from this is not a thing that happens to this is now a thing that I am taking on. Because short of editing out a forgotten line or something along those lines, all of these things for the most part are still happening. Making sure that if you are a musician, making sure that the microphones are mixed appropriately so that we can hear you over the guitar, so that the drums aren't drowning everything else out. That is all happening, but it is not your focus. And so changing your mindset into now this is something that I get the privilege of taking on and perfecting can help it feel less like cheating. At the end of the day, the primary goal is that your listeners who are coming to your podcast as podcast listeners feel like what they are consuming fits in with their expectations while potentially circumventing some of them. You know, bring them a new experience, bring them something that's going to engage and hit them in a new spot, but allow yourself to find a way to sort of merge and blend with the constraints of what each medium brings to the table. And something else to be aware of is that this is where feedback can be so incredibly helpful. Something else that, this person was talking about was that some of the feedback that they'd received was that people like that it's unedited. This is where I have some mixed opinions that people don't necessarily know what they like. And I know that that sounds ridiculously pompous and crass, but what I more so mean is that people like things that feel authentic. People like things that feel real and organic and true. It is so possible to capture that spirit, but still have your audio be equalized. It is so possible to capture that spirit and be polished that, you don't have to make it sound clinical. You don't have to make it sound snooty and too professional. It can still sound really casual, but play nicely within the space of podcasting and the expectations that conventional listeners are going to have. So while you may be getting feedback that, people like how raw and unfiltered it feels, understand that that is also going to turn off a portion of your audience and of your potential audience. And that's somewhere that, episodes that I've done on how much should you edit, those kind of things, that's always going to be a point of conversation. But if you can find the balance where things sound really listenable, where, we're reducing mouth sounds, where we're setting luffs so that it sounds good, whether it's, in your Bluetooth headphones, in your car, playing on your phone, if you can get it sounding good and still maintain that really personable quality, I think that's where the magic happens. So, obviously play around with things, see what feels right for you and for your listeners, listen to the feedback that you're getting. But truly, there is so much merit to adapting and evolving. And sometimes the biggest benefit is that it's going to get you out of your comfort zone and learning new things. And that can allow your art to really take off in a new and unexpected direction. And that's pretty powerful stuff right there. The biggest homework that I would give you if you are someone who is struggling with this is listen to a bunch of podcasts. Just click play on whatever Spotify suggests to you. Listen and listen critically for what choices are being made. Are they implementing background music or ambient sound? Are they, do they have long pauses where you can tell that they're looking something up? Do they sound unpolished? Is there a dog barking in the background all the time? Does it sound really muffled, or can you hear them rustling a lot? Like, what do you hear and what appeals to you as a listener? Especially if you are not someone who has traditionally been a big consumer of podcasts, spend some time in the space and see what works for you and what doesn't, and think about how you could adapt that to your own show. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. And, if this is impactful to you, or you feel like there is someone else in your circle who needs to hear it, please share this episode with them. You can come hang out with me over on Instagram at Sonivia Studios, and you can shoot me an email at rude.sonivia@gmail.com if you have any questions, want to expand on this further, or you'd like to get a little bit of support with your show. I look forward to hearing from you, and I will talk to you next week. Thank you so much for helping me take podcasting up an octave.